What is going up, faithful? It's been too long since I had Rob Shue on the channel, and we're just going to kind of bang on the head some of the latest Niners news and speculation as we're still in the midst of the dry period right before training camp hits. So hopefully you guys can join us, be part of the discussion, and kind of goof around really until the real stuff starts happening in a couple weeks. Then we can all get really stressed, or maybe that's just me. Rob, how you doing? How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing good. I'm not feeling the stress right now. It is the dead period. Like everything that's coming out is rumor and speculation. I'm here for it. I'm all about rumor and speculation and talking about rumor and speculation. That's fascinating stuff to me. But I don't allow it to stress me out. It will only be once we get into real practices, training camp, that type of news where it's players out there on the field that can cause a little bit of stress. So you're not alone there, Aaron.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually kind of enjoy the offseason a little bit because you can kind of just, with your mind, you can let it go places and everything is fair game. And once the season starts and it's real, then you have to deal what's in front of you. So like in the off season, it's like, yeah, we could do this and we could be this good and this player's going to have a breakout year. And then the season starts and it's like, okay, that guy is way overrated. He sucks, you know? So that's where the off season, like my nephew always said, and this is recently, he's like, we have hope in the off season.
Yes.
And then the season starts and then we're like, but hopefully that's not the case anymore. So
no, hopefully when reality smacks us in the face this season, it will be a positive reality. It'll be like, oh yeah, Trey Lance is as good as we all hoped he was going to be. And that's what hits us in the face. Now, let me ask, because I know you've talked about, trending towards pessimism, right? You can run the negative route there when you're in the off season, because you know me, I'm a positive dude. I like to trend towards positivity, especially on the lives, especially when talking about my Niners. So in the offseason, I'm like, oh man, we're going for that 6th Lombardi. Like every move is that key move that was needed. Even the moves I second guess, I'm like, well, that'll probably work out. It'll probably be good. Are you generally positive in the offseason, or do you spin some of these things to the negative? Like, well, yeah, that seems like a good move, but we're probably going to mess it up.
I'm less with the messing it up part. I've kind of gotten to a point where I have pretty good faith with John and Kyle. They're not going to make every decision the right decision. I think, the right. Jimmy Garoppolo's decision situation has been fumbled completely, but it is what it is. There's nothing you can do about it. But this is a really good roster with really good coaching and a young quarterback who I think has the potential to be really good. I vacillate between negative and positive. My negative isn't so negative where I'm like, we suck. It's more or less like, oh, what if we have injuries? And what if this guy doesn't, Charvarius Ward isn't what we think he is. It's kind of that kind of stuff. It's never like we're going to be garbage and I hate my team. I get like that during the years, like when we had like Singletary, where I was just like, this is the worst run franchise of all time.
Where it's embarrassing to be a fan.
Yeah, where your coach is mooning players and stuff. It's just like, what happened to this once proud franchise? So I'm not in that headspace anymore, but it's still like I fight with my nature to be negative. Not negative in a sense where like I'm just a Debbie Downer, but like I don't always think with the glass half full. It's always the glass is a little empty. So
yeah,
I definitely want to say hi to the chat real quick. I got Raphael 6562. I almost said his number wrong. 562 Niners. He's in here quite often. He comments on my videos. What's going on? He says, "What's up, Rob and Aaron?" Mariah from 49er Faithfully. How you doing? Brian Culp, huge supporter of my channel. He's been there for a long time. It's I'll tell you what, man. It's stream. What am I trying to say? When I live stream, I always have anxiety before I pop on all the time.
Right.
But once the chat starts rolling in and people start, saying like, "Hey, it's been a while, great show," it always goes away. So anytime I see people start coming in here and they're pretty nice and stuff, that anxiety starts to lessen. But anytime I start a stream, I don't know if you're the same. I always get really nervous for some reason. I don't know. It's just because you're in front of the world and you can really screw the pooch if you talk or say something the wrong way. So
Yeah, no, I feel that anxiety as well. It's interesting to me with, I have a pretty regular routine down where I basically have streams Monday through Friday. But, during the off season, I'll tend to miss a Monday or a Friday stream because I say to myself, well, I'll take a long weekend from streaming. There's not a whole hell of a lot of content. So it's easier to just say skip one of those. And I find it that much more difficult when I have 2 days off. Starting up the next live stream, there's anxiety. If I take a third day off or a fourth day off, it gets progressively harder to then turn that camera back on with confidence. But I agree wholeheartedly that as soon as you get into the stream, as soon as you start talking to people and you see the response coming in as well, that lifts my spirits. That's why I'm so engaged with the chat. Like
you are.
It's not a disingenuous thing for me. It really is enjoyment of the interaction, really liking that participation and that dialogue that happens between a live chat and a live stream. It's wild to me that we can be spread out all over the freaking globe and you've got people chiming in at the same time, putting that positivity, that enthusiasm out there. I love it.
Brian Culp says, I get heartburn and real nerves are no joke. I eat Tums. I eat them. I don't eat Tums per se. What happens is like before I will not eat and watch a 49ers game because I get a massive stomach ache. So what I'll do is I usually eat about an hour before the game. And then win or lose, me and my brother make coffee after the game and we talk about our teams, whether the Dolphins or the 49ers. So we have like a Sunday ritual. But yeah, to me, I don't stream as regularly right now because I'm back working.
Right.
And I work late into the evening. And a lot of times when I stream, it's just sometimes it doesn't work out. And a lot of the guys that I like streaming with, like you or Jesse or Jack, everybody's got a pretty regular schedule. So I'm a little bit more scattered. Once the season starts, I will do probably a post-game reaction, a midweek like review, and then like a Friday or Saturday preview stream. So I'll be kind of regular again.
Yeah.
And I'll have to plan it out. I do like the collaborative part because I think collaboration streams lend themselves to be less stressful and more just like two guys talking.
Totally.
Whereas when you have to carry an hour and a half, it can become like my palms and my feet sweat like crazy when I'm doing a solo stream. It's crazy. But
I love it. Yeah, no, I'm here for it, man. If there's a down point in the program, you just let me know. I kick it up a notch and I turn on the shoe charm. I mean, I don't know that that's a real thing, but I'll try.
I definitely don't have charm.
When you have that collaboration, it's great because you bounce the energy back off of one another. Again, like that's why I love the chat is that reverberation of the energy. But in a collab, that's the true form where you get to see facial expressions and it is just two dudes talking about the 49ers. And I understand why people want to tune into that because I want to tune into that. Like that's my kind of content. Couple of people talk about the Niners.
Yes, definitely. I figure we get in my first topic. I sent you them a little bit. There's pretty basic standard topics, but this one, a lot of people are talking about it. Not just me. I see Jesse. I see you. I see Jack. The anti-Trey Lance narrative, man. Like what? We're going through this weird thing where it's like 1 week it's everything's super positive, and then the next week we got people talking about arm fatigue and that he's not ready, and that's why Jimmy's still here. It's just like, oh, dude, it's so aggravating. I let myself get caught up in that crap, and I get pissed. And I want to fire back at people on Twitter, but I've learned not to because it's pointless. How do you deal with just this ever present, ever up and down pro Trey Lance, crap on Trey Lance? The guy that talks about him, who is a former scout, that Yahoo. And then we got, people that will just say like, the Niners are going to regret. Jimmy is super accurate. He does this well. He does that well. And Trey can't do any of this. Right. It's all over the place, but it's pretty much the same regurgitated crap. What's your take on the whole Trey Lance kind of like seesaw thing with like, it's kind of positive and then goes right back to like the, all the questions of whether he's got it or not.
It's wild to me. I will say that first and foremost. And I do keep in mind throughout this period, something that I think is true in most avenues of life, that in the absence of information, people hallucinate. they fill in the blanks with their own minds. And typically what goes on in people's heads is a little bit screwy, right? They're not basing it off of reality. We're not getting most of these reports. We're not getting new information. This is based off of things that have already happened, interviews with people about prior experience. And so it's running with old storylines, knowing that you're going to get clicks, knowing that there's this dearth of information, this lack of information about Trey Lance. Very small sample size where he was able to actually throw in live action last year. And so you have a whole agitated fan base. I think the 49er fan base is something like 8 million strong or some ridiculous, some such number. And so it's a lot of people that are anxious, and the algorithms and the people that come up with content are feeding into that anxiety. They know that if you polarize a story one way or the other, it's going to generate significant clicks. And so Jack and I were talking about this on my program earlier today as well. This Mike Silver and Colin Cowherd interview that came out. And Jack was pointing out, if you listen to the entirety of the 8-minute clip, whenever they're talking about the 49ers, they go through Trey Lance, they go through a little bit about Jimmy Garoppolo, that it's a fairly balanced clip where they go through and they talk about some of the unknowns with Trey Lance. Sure, they bring up this concept of arm fatigue that seems to come from an earlier report that doesn't have a whole lot of source material to it. And so that I'm skeptical about that. But for the rest of it, it's a fairly balanced report. But when it gets tagged and put out there to us on Twitter or via Colin Cowherd's own show, they really hone in on that criticism of Trey, which makes it seem like it is a negatively skewed storyline because that's what generates the clicks. And so I acknowledge that while also acknowledging that generally it's not new information. And with that, it gives me some comfort that it doesn't get me as riled up.
I saw something from Grant. He said that if it was Trey Lance that was the first overall pick in the draft with Jacksonville, that he would be labeled a bust right now because of how bad at times Trevor Lawrence played last year. And I completely agree with that 100%. You know, Grant's got his own viewpoints and he can kind of, you know, you go one way or the other with him.
Sure.
But lately he's been on fire with a lot of the stuff he's been saying. He's pretty pro Trey Lance, which is awesome because he can be, you know, one way or the other. But
yes,
I agree with that. I feel like if he was in Jacksonville and that was the pick, that they would have been all over. I don't know what the reason for like I guess it's the lack of reps and this and that. I know that from what I've listened to, I listened to Locked On 49ers this morning. I was listening to where Eric Crocker and Brian Peacock, and they were talking about a lot of it seems to come from last year. Yes. That he might have had arm fatigue last year because of the lack of throwing he did the previous year, and then how much throwing he did from the end of the college football season and through the draft into mini camps. So there might have been some arm fatigue last year, but I don't know how it's getting misconstrued into this year. Again, like you said, maybe people are splicing stuff and making it sound worse than what it is. And a guy like me, I see a 1.5 minute clip where someone's crapping on Lance again. And I'm like, I immediately don't even have, I don't think with a clear mind, I'm like, they're attacking him again. These sons of, you know what? And like, instead of maybe like looking at it in more of a wider spectrum and kind of trying to see if there's a longer clip or, you know, there's a more, I'm trying to think of the word. There's more, I don't know.
More context.
More context. Perfect word. Exactly the word I was looking for. So Lance is now dating John Brody's granddaughter. Yeah, there was a talk that Trey Lance was dating Colin Cowherd's daughter for a while and that maybe that's some of his angst. To me, that's just like freaking TMZ crap. But
right. It is. Yeah. It's definitely TMZ level of like, you know, is it true? Isn't it true? I don't actually know. But I agree. And you actually had Mike Silver. So to your point of like, this is stuff from last year. Mike Silver had a response in a tweet, I'm guessing because of the backlash that came at him from those comments that were put out by the Colin Cowherd show. But his tweet in response was, yes, there were some concerns about Trey Lance's accuracy and arm fatigue during his rookie year. That said, here's some things to get excited about. And he goes on to say elite intelligence, arm strength, athletic ability, relative lack of experience suggests a high ceiling. We shall see. And so he says that as if like, well, I mean, you should have known that the arm fatigue comment was talking about his rookie year. But it really was the fact that they didn't put that out in their clip about the rookie year they implied that it was a current issue, that this was sort of breaking news. And so I don't have much sympathy for Mike Silver or Colin Cowherd in the heat they may have taken for that report, because it did sort of imply that this was new information.
These guys flip and flop. A lot of these guys that do stuff like, the Colin Cowherds of the world, they flop worse than LeBron when he fakes getting fouled. I mean, like, it is just like, they don't even try to be objective. They just, every week, everybody is, I mean, like, we're going to get into a little bit of the Jerry Rice, but like, even Jerry Rice was like saying different things in separate interviews. And I'm like, what the heck is wrong with everybody? Like, the saying, Rob, stay with that same energy. Like,
yes,
keep your opinion and stick with it. And don't be easily pushed off of it just because you hear something else.
Right. Well, I would say, like, it's cool to change your opinion, but at least acknowledge that it's changed. Don't try and pretend that you've been saying this all along. That's, to me, where I get a little agitated.
Yeah, I hate that, like you said, this is such a dead period right now. There's just so much garbage, honestly, that's out there right now. The only people I really listen to are the guys that I'm cool with and friends with in the Niners YouTube community, like you and Jack and Jesse and Jason and all the other awesome, great content creators, or like the national guys, like the actual, beat guys like Matt Mayoka and Barrows. Now, I'm not always a big fan of Mayoka and Barrows because they're kind of like pro Niners and they don't really, sometimes they're a little bit like not quick to be judgmental. They're a little bit soft on criticism.
Yeah, almost an apologetic tone at times, like covering for the organization sometimes.
Yes, and that's one thing again, you could say about Grant. Grant will, because Grant's not a 49er fan. He's just giving his opinion. A lot of times he ends up being right so much about all of this stuff. It's almost ridiculous. And so, like, I always kind of lean more towards his side of stuff, where I just kind of like, he stays on his part of it. He doesn't move off of it. I like guys that kind of have the nerve or have the braveness to like say something and stick with it, instead of some of these national guys where like 1 week they're talking like Trey Lance is, the next Achilles Smith. And then the next week, someone on ESPN is talking about him in the same breath as Patrick Mahomes. It's just like, it's aggravating. I don't watch a lot of television, but every time I do, I freaking regret it because it's always the same stuff. Like I said, I keep with my dudes that I'm cool with and I love you guys, or I go with the Barrows and the guys like that. It's tough, man. Like, we need training camp to get here. And it's almost here.
I agree.
It's almost here.
I'm actually a big fan of both Matt Mayoko and Matt Barrows. I see what you mean about, in particular, Matt Mayoko and the relationship that NBC has with the 49ers. And Matt Mayoko is very respectful in the way in which he talks about the organization. So it can often come across as sort of a 49ers apologist. But I find Matt Barrows, sorry, I was speaking about Matt Mayoko just then. I find Matt Barrows to be he is positive, he is funny, but I find him to cover the team pretty accurately. And I will say, like, I won't get into any sort of overt criticism of Grant, but I find him to be one of the bigger flip-floppers out there. Like,
do you?
I feel like he says all the various takes that are out there. And so like he ends up being right because he's pepper sprayed everything possible. So eventually he can be like, yeah, remember on that show, like Tuesday, June 2nd, when I said that, see, I was on that one early.
He'll re-upload it and be like, see, I told you.
Right. He doesn't re-upload the video where he completely contradicted that point.
No. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm just at the point right now where we need something concrete to be happening, and a lot of this will go away. I think Jimmy Garoppolo still being in the building, and that's going to be our next topic. We're going to talk about old Jimmy G, him being in the building still, so to speak, and that not being resolved. It's giving a lot of these people who search for clicks, who know that they're going to get people in an uproar, it gives them material. I feel once Lance becomes the unquestioned starter and Jimmy's no longer in the building and then we start seeing stuff on film, like we see games with Trey Lance, that will be when it finally, at least that part of it goes away. And then there's going to be the whole new narrative of, he struggles in one game, and did the Niners make the right choice?
Totally.
And it's going to be a while before this kid's always going to be highly criticized, I think, just because what they did to get him, and the fact that Jimmy, was a winner and all this stuff. Although if you really look into a lot of it with Jimmy, especially in the playoffs, he's a horrible underperformer. So
you're definitely going to get that criticism because of the fact that the 49ers were a playoff caliber team who then, as you point out, gave up so much to go get Trey Lance. That feels like a perfect setup for people to then criticize any missteps Trey Lance has.
Yeah, like I said, it's gonna continue. It's gonna continue in a different way. Yeah, it's gonna take on different forms once the season gets started. The narrative might stop with him having arm fatigue and, oh, Jimmy's still on this team. It means it's Jimmy's team, and then it's gonna switch to something else. So I'm totally ready for it, but I'm still not cool with it. But it is what it is. Speaking of Jimmy G, the latest on Jimmy G, depending on who you talk to, is he wants to relocate to Tampa, which doesn't make any sense. Like they want him in Tampa. They want him to. There's been talk about him between the Niners and the Bucks. There's talk that he could be outright cut. There's talk that maybe he goes to Seattle. There's so much misinformation and just craziness right now. The fact that he's still on this team is super stressful to me, because it's just. He said his goodbye last year, Grant. He said it in that final press conference. He was emotional. I don't know. I commented on your live stream the other day. I said I feel like him and his agent did this on purpose. But that's just me speaking with emotion and not with any fact. What's your take on all this Jimmy? All this non-Jimmy news. It's all this just what they call it, hyperbole, or just people speaking out their ear end.
Yeah, a little bit. There is definitely people talking out the side of their mouths. And I think that you have to pay attention to it because we are in a period of speculation. And right now, I'm sure that there are teams inquiring about Jimmy Garoppolo's health. One thing I'm convinced of is Jimmy Garoppolo has value in this league. It doesn't surprise me when there are reports of teams kicking the tires on Jimmy Garoppolo. He is, in my humble opinion, somewhere around the 15th to 20th, most talented quarterback out there. And so there would be teams at the right price, at the right trade package that would be interested. I think that list of teams interested in a trade is very short because of the factors at play. The surgery, Jimmy Garoppolo's salary for this coming year, and having to give up draft capital in order to get him. If the 49ers get painted into a corner and end up having to release Jimmy Garoppolo at some point, I believe that list of interested teams will grow substantially, that there could be 7 or 8 teams that look to kick the tires on Jimmy Garoppolo, speak with his agent, see what kind of a contract he would want to come in and be their starter, or in this case with Tampa Bay, a temporary backup. There's a part of me that says, hey, Jimmy, he's got over $100 million at this point. You would think he's banked a fair percentage of that after taxes. And he doesn't seem like a guy who needs a lavish lifestyle. Like he still strikes me as a blue collar dude. So when you ask the question of whether he would want to be a backup in Tampa Bay until Tom Brady retires and he takes over, like maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he would view that as a step down from being a starter of the San Francisco 49ers to now, being back in Tom Brady's shadow again. Like, normally I'd say, hey, if you're going to renegotiate a contract where he gets paid 12 to 14 million or something like that, hey, 12 to 14 million is nothing to sneeze at. But when you combine the fact that he's already made a boatload of money and that he could wait out a year and potentially rejoin them, it becomes tricky for me to really wrap my head around Jimmy accepting a backup role without first being released by the 49ers, that someone would trade for him and make him a backup. But I got to be honest, if there's one team out there where I could buy the storyline, it's Tampa Bay.
That would be interesting if that actually happened, where he goes back to being in the shadow of Tom Brady still at 45. I keep in my mind, I keep thinking like, is there a possibility they can come back to the 49ers, be Trey Lance's backup? But it just doesn't work. If you're trying to tell the kid that he's the guy and you're pushing the narrative that this is the future of the team, having Jimmy around, to me, regardless if it's a financial reason or not, it just doesn't serve Trey Lance's development at any point. I know people say he'd be a really good backup, and he would, but there's too much history between us and Jimmy, and there's too many players in that locker room that like Jimmy, love Jimmy, like, Kittle, for instance.
Yeah.
And I just think that kind of situation would lend itself to, maybe some, what's the word I'm looking for? Some strife or some, people taking sides in the situation, especially if Trey comes out and he struggles a little bit. So
right.
Trey needs to head. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's like an expected outcome, right? The dude's a second-year quarterback who's about to take over the starting reps. So you expect him to have some downturns. And you're right. If you've got Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster, when that happens, when Trey Lance has a misstep, as you would expect him to in taking these first starts, there'll be cries for Jimmy Garoppolo. So to me, the only way in which that makes sense is if you've cut Jimmy Garoppolo towards the end of training camp, he goes out to try and find a new deal. It's too late for him to latch on with anybody. He's still around. And then you renegotiate. You say, hey, Jimmy, we'll welcome you back as a very clear backup. The deal will reflect that it's a 1-year deal to be paid backup quarterback money. In that instance, you still have the potential conflict that you're referencing there. You still have potential locker room cancer situation in having a well-liked backup quarterback. But it would at least send the message of this is a 1-year deal. It is backup quarterback money. He is not starting. I could wrap my head around the logic of making the 49ers a better team by having a more suitable backup than Nate Sudfeld. I would still share your concerns about the locker room chemistry and how it would impact it.
One of my concerns too is if Kyle Shanahan gets gun shy, if Trey is struggling. And now he has this out that he can go to,
right, to
protect him. And I feel like that could be something that people don't really think about. But it's like Jimmy would be there, and man, Trey's really had a rough game. He threw 4 picks in the last game. Damn it, we're a Super Bowl caliber team.
Right.
Jimmy's a starter again. That's what I feel like what would happen. The kid needs to go through whatever he's got to go through, and he needs to go through it as the guy. And
I think there's something to be said for that.
It would be cool if he could take a backup role and take less money and be the backup. Because you're right. Do you really, really want Nate Sudfeld as the backup, especially with this roster?
Right.
If it stays healthy, I don't know. It's to me, it lends itself to like you said, it lends itself to problems. It can definitely. I hate to use the word cancer, but that's exactly what it would be. It would be. Especially guys like Kittle and Juszczyk and all those guys, they love Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, big time.
They're all like bros and stuff. And the kid, as much of a leader as he's been this offseason and, calling up rookies after they get drafted, he still really hasn't done anything in the NFL, and Jimmy has. So it's like working, I don't know, we're working at a place and we have a new boss. We have a boss that's going to take over for our last boss. And all of us really love the last boss, but
right.
The new boss is there, and then they decide that we're not going to lose that boss, but he's just going to take a step down in responsibility. So now you're not exactly you're always going to feel closer to the guy that was your boss than the new guy, and it's going to cause all this I don't know, uncomfortable situations where it's it's better that the guy just move on, go somewhere else. You can still be cool with them outside of work, but now you have a new boss and you have to kind of get used to that situation. So I don't know. I'm
with you. It feels like taking the training wheels off to get Jimmy Garoppolo out of the building in its entirety, because then to your point, you cannot, if things go badly, you cannot turn back in that direction. It's this is Trey's freaking team and we're moving forward in that direction. So for that reason, I'm all about it.
Wanda Brown says, "What's up, Rob?" Strider, who I guess was on your show or was on watching your last show.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in Rob's show, but if Cleveland is interested in trading Jimmy for Brissett, I don't know. Is that even possible with the amount of money that they're paying Brissett? Or
I mean, I think so. Last I checked, Brissett got a 1 year, like $5 million deal. And Cleveland could, before the Baker deal, where they ate $10 million of it, they had enough salary cap to take on the entirety of Jimmy Garoppolo's salary. So they paid out $10 million in the Baker Mayfield trade. So I'm not entirely sure that they could, but it would at least be close in Cleveland being able to fit that underneath their cap, giving away $5 million in salary and trading away Jacoby Brissett and bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo and his $24.2 million salary that has yet to be paid, or whatever portion of it they'd be liable for. The question for me is, does Cleveland view Garoppolo as that much of an upgrade over Jacoby Brissett? I mean, I think he's an upgrade. Do I think he's close to like a $23 million upgrade, $22 million upgrade? I don't know. That's a lot of money, especially for a 1 year rental. But Cleveland is in an unprecedented set of circumstances where they have an immense amount of pressure from this decision they made to bring in someone who is under scrutiny from the entire country, and may not be able to start that individual and have a playoff caliber roster. So there's a lot of factors at play where you could see Cleveland making an irrational decision that they normally wouldn't make if these factors weren't in play.
I'm going to get to Brian's comment real quick. He says, I have a bet Jimmy G will be here week 1. Subway, eat fresh, everyone. Oh, dude. If I have to see that commercial one more time and him still being on this team, I think I'm going to punch a hole in my television. But please, Brian, I know you're just joking, but well, maybe you're not joking.
No, he's got a bet with me that he's going to be on there. I forget what the terms of the bet are, but it's on film, so we can always go back and watch.
Was it you having to eat a Subway sandwich or something on stream, or is that
no? I mean, I hope not, because I really haven't eaten a Subway sandwich in a long time, and I really don't want to.
It's really awful.
But it is around something with like a Subway gift card or something of that nature.
I try to, Bryant says trust the, where is it? He says trust the process, and I'm trying, but we've been stuck in neutral for like 6 months and nothing's changed. And the Niners say that they will trade Jimmy. They will not release him. And they have their mindset on getting something for him. It's like, who buckles first? Is it going to be the 49ers front office? To me, this is just like, it's so freaking annoying. It's great. And you're right. It generates a lot of clicks.
Sure.
But most 49er fans who aren't Jimmy stans and who just want to see the team be really good, they're not Trey Lance stans. They're just new era, new quarterback stans, I guess.
Right.
They want to see the future. We're done. Jimmy served his purpose, but the fact of the matter is, what Jimmy has done, Trey can do. To me, what separates the two of them is there's things that Trey can do that Jimmy cannot, that might be the difference in losing a Super Bowl or an NFC Championship game to winning a Super Bowl and bringing that 6 Lombardi that we've been wanting so much. Trey might be that difference maker. When I see things that Jimmy did on the offense, it wasn't all extraordinary accomplishments, physical accomplishments. He was in essence, he was a game manager. And if anybody who wants to argue with me, I mean, you watch 49er games, to me, he's nothing more than a point guard facilitating to his playmakers. Whereas Trey Lance himself is a playmaker, and he could take plays that are broken and extend them. And it's just a whole other element that the 49ers haven't had with Jimmy. So I don't know. I'm excited. I'm more positive about him than I've been about any other young player coming into an established locker room. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm definitely just waiting for camp to start, and I want to hear a lot of positive news. I hope he has a really good camp and it's just positive, and we get to the season and it just keeps going, because right now there's so much nothing that it's just a constant cycle of the same news.
Yeah, I want to hear positive news, and I want to see clips that show me with my own 2 eyes what's going on out there on the field.
Bryant Culp says there definitely is Lance stands. Yeah, there is. I'm not really a Lance stan, more than I'm just a time to move on stan. I'm kind of over the Jimmy
The writing's
stuff.
on the wall, Stan.
Yes. people are saying, Jimmy's still on this team for a reason. No, they messed up. There was a bad situation. The surgery, Jimmy would have been gone because there was a lot of teams that had needed quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And Jimmy would have been gone a long time ago. So
I think the trade would have happened if it weren't for the surgery. I definitely believe that.
Absolutely. Mario Childress says, the positive yet realistic take you come with is much needed, brother. Keep rocking. I don't know if he's talking about me or you, but I'll take the compliment.
Yeah, right. Either way, one of us gets a compliment. I'm good with it.
Absolutely. I just want to win a Super Bowl. It's been so long. Right. Listen, I was the 94-95 season. I was a freshman in high school. I was 14 going on 15. So I was actually 15 when the Niners won the Super Bowl. My nephew was born that summer. He's a 49ers fan. I have seen, or at least I remember, at least 3 Super Bowls that they've won. My nephew has only been alive for the 2 we have lost.
Oof.
So he's never experienced, I'm going to tell you, when I went to school the Monday after the Super Bowl in 95, I had a guy who's a friend. He's a friend of mine, a coworker of mine. We're both 42 years old. We work at the same place. He was a Cowboys fan when I was in high school. He's a Cowboys fan now. We were in a discussion the other day, and I was like, oh, by the way, the Cowboys still suck. And he goes, man, at least I'm not a 49ers fan. And we were like, and I looked at him and I go, bro, honestly, we're still living in 1995. And he looks at me and he goes, that's all we got. That's all we have. None of us have anything else other than 95, 96, because the Cowboys won the following year. And then that's all. And then for us guys who are Niners or Cowboys fans, it's been 27 years. It's been a long time. My brother's a Dolphins fan. They haven't won a Super Bowl since 6 years before I was born, and I was born in 79. So he's got it even worse. So
yeah, but hey, for those fans that have never seen a victory, they've never seen the Super Bowl, Lombardi Trophy hosted above the 49ers locker room. When they do finally see that, it's going to be that much sweeter. Those of us who grew up with the 49ers being a storied franchise, we're a little bit spoiled, right? We had never seen, the Niners are perfect in Super Bowls. So when they went and played the Ravens, it was a foregone conclusion. Of course, we were going to go 6 for 6 in the Super Bowl. We weren't going to lose to Joe Flacco. But I'll tell you what, after having sat through 2 Super Bowl losses, I can definitively say that the next Super Bowl victory is going to be that much sweeter because I sat through those very, very excruciatingly painful Super Bowl losses.
That Kansas City loss to me was one of the hardest pro sport experiences I've ever been through. The Ravens one was we were bad for so long, and then we got good kind of quickly.
Yeah.
So it was almost like it happened, and then we were back to sucking a couple of years after that. And so it was okay. I guess that was just a blip.
Right. Just a little fluke.
Then we just had that super kick-ass dominant, 2019 season where everything just fell into place, and we were up with 7 minutes to go, and somehow credit to Kansas City. They were the better team. Yep. Honestly, I do believe that. They had the better quarterback and better playmakers in that game. Our defense didn't come up when we needed them to.
Nope.
There's a lot of factors, but all I'll say is that I've been wanting to have Eric Davis on my channel for so long. I've been trying to contact them and get a hold of them because that 49ers Cowboys, those 3 seasons where the Niners lost the 2 and then they finally won. I'm so fascinated. I've always wanted to hear and have an interview with a 49ers player and I want to know what their experience was going through what us fans went through, where we lost 2 years in a row. Dallas was kicking our behind, and then we finally got over the hump. I want to just break down someone's mind, a player's mind, and just be like, what was that like going through that? What was it like finally getting over that hump? Yeah. I'm very interested in that era because those were my teenage years. And
sure.
I remember Eric Davis, I follow him on Instagram. He posted to him and Tim McDonald. And I said, in the comments, I put that picture encapsulates my teenage years because it was the 2 of them. This is before Eric Davis ended up going to play for the Panthers.
Right.
Man, I miss those days. We were in it every year, Rob. We were in it every freaking year.
Fantastic. I mean, again, like when I started going to games somewhere in 87-ish, after moving from the East Coast to the Bay Area, I had no idea how spoiled I was in watching the 49ers. It was stumbling into the blind luck to have found myself in the Bay Area in the mid 80s, and then to have my father begin getting, tickets to games to watch the Niners. I just didn't realize what I was seeing in front of me. It took me a long time until we had some of those losing seasons to where I realized how fortunate I had been and how that had left me a little bit spoiled and therefore had those expectations. I found 2011, 2012, and the recent resurgence to be that much more special because of the years that we suffered through.
Definitely. Christy Marie says, nationally, it seems like people expect the Niners to take a step back. Why? Because of Lance. What does he have to do for the fans to fully buy a stock? Win. He has to win.
Yes.
Like Adrian says in Rocky 2, after she comes out of the coma to Rocky, win.
It's so true. If he comes out and wins the first couple of games on the season, on the schedule, which are very winnable games starting in Chicago, that's going to go a long way with the fan base. It would quickly erode if we then lose the two next ones against Denver and LA, right? If we end up 2-2 after the first 4 games, we'll be back to panic mode. But every win that Trey Lance gets under his belt, even if they're ugly wins, even if they're wins in which, he throws 1 touchdown and 1 interception and completes, 58% of his passes, a win will go a long way, I think, in convincing the fan base that, like, hey, we can win with this guy. He brings some added elements that Jimmy didn't have, but he can do some of those basic things that we need him to do in order to execute. And I think the faith will rise from there.
It's just going to take him playing and playing well over a very long period of time. There was an interview I just saw, or a clip from an interview I saw with RG3. He says, we're not going to really know the full story about Trey Lance for about 2 to 3 seasons.
Yes.
So everybody needs to just, including myself, Rob, and everybody else who's super, we're all, we could say we're positive and we could say that we are patient, but at the end of the day, all of us react viscerally to wins and losses. And if the Niners play bad for a couple of weeks straight, or we say what we want, and then when we actually go through it and we watch games on a weekly basis, it's stressful.
It is.
Every week is like the end of the world. And until the Niners get that 6th Lombardi and kind of put out that flame, I think 49er fans will finally start to kind of like enjoy the process. Nobody's enjoying the process right now because it's been so long since we won. So every time we have a good team and something starts to happen, maybe negatively, we panic. Yeah. And we're like, oh man, we suck. Oh man, this guy needs to go. Get rid of his ass. Like we just need to win one. And I hope Trey is that answer. I hope Trey is the piece of resistance that gets us over the top.
I believe he is.
Speaking of getting over the top, one player we need to have in order to do that is Deebo Samuel. There really hasn't been too much news one way or the other about Deebo Samuel lately. I heard stuff a couple weeks ago that, it's leaning towards, he still didn't rescind his trade offer, but it's leaning towards a happy resolution.
Right.
What's your take on the no news, good news type situation right now with Deebo Samuel? And do you think that the Niners will eventually get a deal done with him?
I do. I think that the 49ers basically painted themselves into a corner when they didn't trade Deebo Samuel by the NFL draft. If you were going to get rid of Deebo and attempt to maximize the season that he just had, you would want to get some pieces back in return immediately to make that impact so that you still have a playoff caliber roster with or without Deebo Samuel. So the message that I got in not trading Deebo was that the 49ers organization was confident in their ability to get a deal done. And it was at about that time where you stopped hearing things from Deebo's camp, with the exception of that Jeremy Fowler report of like, hey, by the way, Deebo has not rescinded his trade offer as of now. And I do believe that probably originated from somewhere in Deebo's camp as sort of that little gentle poke the bear. Like maybe contract negotiations hadn't been progressing in the way that Deebo's camp would have wanted them to. So they were like, hey, let's just remind the public that Deebo hasn't rescinded that trade request, because it adds a little bit of pressure to the San Francisco 49ers. But I've remained convicted once Deebo was on the roster post-draft that signified the 49ers were going to need to come to the table and negotiate with him and get a deal done, because you can't possibly trade Deebo after that. I mean, you could. I'll admit it as a possibility. It seems highly unlikely, and therefore it has to mean, in my opinion, that the 49ers are willing to meet Deebo in the middle there somewhere. And I think it's primarily about the guaranteed money. That's my intuition on it.
I think the latest deal that happened with Terry McLaurin, a lot of people started saying that the Niners kind of have an idea finally. I don't know why it took them so long, but they have an idea finally of what it's going to take, which is kind of weird. But yeah, the Niners, I mean, the Niners are they can't be cheap. I will say this, and I repeat this on a lot of my live streams. Larry Krueger says it best. Don't get rid of your best players and think you're better for it.
Right.
This whole mindset that, we can accumulate first-round picks and replace players. How did that work with DeForest Buckner?
Jury's still out, but it doesn't look good.
It doesn't always work that easily. That's why when I see people, like, I'll make a video, and that's fine. I want other opinions. I'm not against it. I'm just seeing, I see some people that are like, they're dead set on trade them and get a first-rounder. And I'm thinking, and then what? Now we have to draft the player pretty much to replace him. And now that player has to be as good, if not better, than the player he's replacing. So it's not always as easy as just, we're going to trade a guy away and then we're going to get a draft pick for him and we're going to trade and get his replacement. This isn't a Jerry Rice. I mean, the Niners didn't trade Jerry Rice and then get Terrell Owens. Sometimes you just luck into players and you make the right pick. And then sometimes you pick Giovanni Carmazzi instead of, than Tom Brady. And so it is what it is. Listen, but when you have great players on your roster, you have to do your best. I know there's a salary cap, and I know there's, it takes money, and not everybody can be reassigned, but your core is your core for a reason.
Yeah.
And those players are the players like your Bosas, your Warners, your Trent Williams, your Deebos. Those players, and Kittle, those players are the reason why we're not a 2-win team and we're competing for a chance to go to the playoffs. And then who knows what? I mean, look at us. We came in as one of the last playoff seeds out there, and we're 2 minutes away from going to the Super Bowl.
Right.
If we had a competent quarterback in that game who could make throws to Ayuk, who was wide open more than once, we're talking about a whole different situation. So you can't just trade away guys. To me, him showing up to OTAs. I know Jack Hammer had he said something. It might have been Jack Hammer or somebody else who said that sometimes guys show up so it looks better for them if they end up being traded.
Sure.
They kind of were cooperating.
Yeah, it makes you look like a team player.
Right. So until he's signed, I won't really comment on that. But once he's signed, I'll say, okay, it was a good sign that he showed up to OTAs, especially then them being they were mandatory. So I just think you mix him with a quarterback that can move, with Ayuk and Kittle, maybe Ray, Juwan Jennings getting better, and Danny Gray and all these players. This team, if healthy, has a chance to be really special this year.
Yes,
I really believe that in my heart, that the 49ers have the chance to where they could go into games and literally beat the brakes off of people because they're that talented in their core. Their core players. So we'll see, though. I mean, it still all has to happen. But like I said, man, I've been really a lot more positive than I've been in years, only because I think Trey Lance just offers stuff that Jimmy doesn't.
Yeah.
Jimmy just doesn't offer, but we'll see.
I'm here for it, man. I'm here for them beating the brakes off of people.
Strider says, good chat, fellas. Have a good weekend. You too, my man. Thank you. I'd trade Deebo. I'd trade Deebo. Niners running the team. Wide receivers are a dime a dozen unless it's T.O. Deebo is not T.O. He's pretty damn good, though. He's not. I understand the logic of wanting to draft a replacement. It just doesn't. It's not that easy. But everybody has a different opinion on it, and I respect that. So
yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, it could work out in any number of circumstances to where one person would feel proven right over the other. But I think that you can definitively say that Deebo is a great fit within Shanahan's offense. And you could use that to argue for or against Deebo. You could say, hey, he's perfect for this offense. He's tailor-made for it. He's such an adaptable piece. Shanahan can use him in all these creative ways. The Niners need to pay top dollar to keep him here. You could flip that same argument and say, Deebo was made by this offense. Sure, trade him somewhere else. He's not going to be the player that he was in San Francisco. He needs Shanahan in order to be successful. Like, I could argue either one of those, and either one could be true. But what I have seen with my own two eyes is what Deebo can do when he's performing at peak, Deebo, and he's operating within Shanahan's offensive scheme. I'm back to this idea of you don't get rid of those players that make your team elite. There are games definitively we would have lost last year if not for the single effort of one man, Deebo Samuel, almost willing us to victory in a couple of those games. So I'm all for paying the dude his money. I get the 49ers wanting to make sure they're not committed to some upside down contract, but that's the risk of the NFL. It's a violent sport. People do get injured. Deebo does have a little bit of an injury history to go off there. So I get the skepticism, but it's a risk, in my opinion, you have to take.
Risks work sometimes. Look at the Rams. Sometimes you just got to go for it and worry about the repercussions later. Yes. If the end game is winning a championship, if that's your end game, you do it by any means necessary. They like to give up all their draft picks and sign free agents. Guess what? They won. We've been doing it a whole different way for a lot of years, and guess what? We haven't won. So to me, at the end of the day, whatever method you use, whether it's, I don't know, right now it's at a point right now where the Niners just need to go out and do it, and I think they better their chances 100-fold by having a guy like Deebo on the roster. Yeah, like you said, you could say that Shanahan makes them, but this team might have won only like 4 or 5 games last year if it wasn't for Deebo Samuel. So
very true.
There was a good one here by Christy Marie. She says, "Are you sure that Lance can game manage like Jimmy is? Jimmy is nowhere near the athlete, but game managers with an elite roster have made it to the Super Bowl many times throughout NFL history." True, I agree. And we did, and we almost won. But I think, honest to God, I feel like any other quarterback in that situation probably Jimmy in the biggest games, as far as like not regular season, I'm talking about playoff games, underperforms. He plays bad. I'm sorry.
That one is fair in my mind. When you criticize that the in big games, Jimmy Garoppolo has not performed well, I'm with you on that. I see him as a very high quality game manager type of quarterback. And I agree with the concept of that being a skill set that should be cherished. I liked what Mike Silver was saying in some of his tweets and talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. I thought he did use a little bit of hyperbole in saying that Jimmy Garoppolo is elite, period. And then he goes on to list those traits that he feels are elite. I would say the only category where I think it's fair to use the elite moniker with Jimmy Garoppolo would be those short passes into tight windows. And that is the skill set of a game manager. And that is the skill set that I'm interested to see if Lance possesses. I still believe, even if he's much more of an average passer in that specific area, that he can overcome that shortcoming with everything else he brings to the table, his ability to push the ball down the field, outside the numbers. So I think he'll offset that even if he's not at Jimmy Garoppolo's level, or even if he's below average at those shorter throws. But I won't take anything away from Jimmy Garoppolo. I think people in general take that for granted about Jimmy Garoppolo. I thought they took it for granted with Alex Smith as well, that there are those things they do very well. There is some correlation between Jimmy Garoppolo and that win-loss record. I would never imply that Jimmy is a winner because of the win-loss record, but I certainly view his contributions to the team as being a part of what made the 49ers successful when he was starting.
I mean, they didn't win until they got him. So
right.
You can.
And when he was out, and Nate Sudfeld, not Nate Sudfeld, but the other two, CJ Beathard
and that other guy,
Nick Mullins. Yeah,
Nick Mullins. Yeah, we were really bad, really bad. Real quick, Corey Davis says hello. 49ers first takes and Rob Shoe. Sorry for all the caps. I'm blind in my right eye. No apologies needed, man.
None
Thank
needed.
you for the $5 super. You are a super supportive guy on YouTube. You support everybody. So props to you. Never have to apologize. Sharing your hard-earned money to, help further the cause for us YouTubers. So I appreciate it very, very much. There's a little bit of a discussion going on in the chat. I don't know if you've noticed about did the 49ers or Shanahan want Trey Lance, and there's just a lot of like, did he really want him, or did he really want Deshaun Watson? It's pretty obvious that the Niners wanted Watson at some point.
Sure. And
then that fell through with the whole legal issue, and then they had to go to plan B. I think that if there's no legal issues situation with Deshaun Watson, I think Deshaun Watson's a San Francisco 49er. I really believe that in my heart. I don't know if you feel this strongly, but I do.
I do. Oh, I at least acknowledge that it seemed to be the most likely course of action.
Yeah, that's what I thought up until, all these things were coming out against him. Robert Davis with another super chat. He says, Aaron and Rob, the new Niners podcast dynamic duo. I don't know about all that, at least on my side. Rob's pretty damn good, but I appreciate the compliment nonetheless.
Hey, we are the dynamic duo, my friend.
Absolutely. We got the beard and the ginger. I don't have as cool of a name as like Jesse and Jackhammer and you and your friend between two beards.
Right.
I'm sure we could figure something out, but
hey, we'll get a good name in there.
Absolutely. We need to stream a lot more together, but like I said, you have a very locked in schedule, and that's cool. I wish I was a little bit more like able to do stuff where I could kind of lock in with certain people weekly, but at the same time, I've been working a lot more, so I'm a lot more tired than I'm almost like okay with the fact that I'm not really locked up right now, because I know once the season starts, I'm streaming at least 3 times a week, if not more.
Right.
Because I have my NWO stream now with my dudes, Beto, Ryan from No Border Sports, and Bashar from 49er Mind. We do at least a weekly show called Niners World Order on Monday. We just started doing it, but we're getting to the point where, it'll be something regular soon. So
nice.
Jump into the next topic real quick. Jimmy Ward, his future with the 49ers. He posted something today talking about, he's worried about next year, and he's going to kick ass and do whatever to a lot of players that are in the NFL this year.
Yes.
He said something about taking out all your best players or something.
He's fired up.
I got to say real thanks to my buddy Charles. He's one of my gaming buddies. He pops in my stream to support me. He said he's not even really into football, but he loves listening to me and my guests. So thank you, Charles. Hopefully I see you on Xbox later. So to go back to what I was saying about the whole Jimmy Ward situation, there's a lot of discussion saying, maybe he doesn't come back next year, and that did the Niners get rid of the wrong safety just to give up their other safety the following year? Do you think the Niners do something to keep Ward?
I was just having this conversation with Jack earlier today, and I have to share Jack's sentiment on this, that it would appear the 49ers not working out an extension for Jimmy Ward when they needed cash, right? I mean, they definitely needed some flexibility that they eventually got from the release of the retirement of Alex Mack. They could have gotten that same level of relief sooner in the offseason and been able to sign their draft picks earlier if they had extended Jimmy Ward. It would seem not doing so sends that message that they're not going to. I don't know that it completely precludes the possibility of the 49ers at some point extending Jimmy Ward, but it does seem unlikely at this point. And it makes me nervous because you're going into a season where you already have Talanoa Hufanga seemingly plugged in as a replacement for Jaquiski Tartt. And I've got my question marks about how that pairing is going to be, but I feel a hell of a lot better about it because he's paired with Jimmy Ward. Now you talk about 1 year from now removing Jimmy Ward from the equation. It doesn't seem like you have his replacement on your roster. The Niners don't typically spend assets early in the draft on secondary, so it does make me concerned as like, what's the plan going forward? Jimmy Ward is very important to this defense. you're going to lose him. You better have a solid plan in place.
Jason Crooks says the safety is the weakest link. They need to move on from Ward. Injury prone and mediocre.
Interesting.
Injury prone-ish. He's gotten a lot better, I think.
Far better. I mean, the first couple of years were injury prone.
Absolutely. I don't think he's mediocre. I don't think he's an elite level safety. Well, but to say he's mediocre is he can do a lot of things on that defense. That man used to play corner at one point. I mean,
yeah,
he used to like your Swiss Army knife.
I would put him up there as elite in specific skill sets. I get that it's hard to call him elite when he doesn't generate the Pro Bowl bursts or the All-Pro votes, but I think that's a direct correlation to the lack of turnovers that he generates, and part of that is a scheme fit. Jason
Crooks says he's not a ball hawker. No, he's not. Nope. But he is as solid of a player that you can say is solid on this team. And if the Niners move on from safety in back-to-back years, I will be that worries me because you can't just plug anybody and expect the team to not have a drop-off.
No.
I hope they find a way to get something done with him in the future. I like Ward. I like his cockiness. I like his ability to just say what he wants.
Oh, I love it.
I love that he went on Grant's show and did his deal last year. But man, if they lost him in back-to-back years, that would suck. Corey Davis just bombed me again with another $5 super chat. It says, if you are the GM of the 49ers and Jimmy G came up to you and says he'll take a pay cut to be Trey Lance's backup, would you keep him? Me and Rob are kind of split on this one. I really don't think he should, just because I think it would inhibit Trey. But Rob is kind of the mindset of, the backup we have now isn't the greatest. And
yeah.
If he's willing,
it's got to be the right price in my mind. It has to be a significant pay reduction that clearly puts him in the backup role. And you really send that message of like, hey, this was too good of a value for us to pass up on. If something, God forbid, happens to Trey Lance, would you want the keys in Nate Sudfeld's hands? Probably not. I'd feel a hell of a lot better if it were Jimmy. But the risk reward thing has to pencil out. So the reward is the cancerous, element to the locker room. The risk there is a cancerous element in the locker room. The reward has to be that you're getting a good player for a cheap amount. So it would need to be a hometown discount in my mind.
Definitely. We're about an hour in. I don't know how much longer you have, but I have a couple more topics left if you're okay to get into them.
For sure. Let's hit the last couple.
So Kinlaw and McGlinchey are both, coming off pretty serious injuries from last year. Well, not really. Kinlaw wasn't really coming off, and they went and kind of cleaned up his knee to see if they could eliminate some of the issues he's been having.
Yeah, McGlinchey, nagging injury that finally got cleaned up.
Right, and McGlinchey, of course, blew his quad out. Both of them coming back. I don't know if they're coming back for training camp. To be honest with you, I don't know the medicals on those guys and if they're expected to be in camp. If you had to, and I already know who I'm going to pick on this one, Kinlaw and McGlinchey. Who's under more pressure this year to perform?
Who is under more pressure to perform? I mean, I have to start out by saying that both are under tremendous pressure to perform. Mike McGlinchey, quite obviously, is in his 5th year and therefore is playing for his next contract. And Javon Kinlaw is coming off of a season wherein he wasn't able to contribute. He's faced significant sort of criticism for his inability to fill in. Not his fault that he was drafted with the pick that the Niners got for giving up DeForest Buckner, but that is the case, and he will always be compared to DeForest Buckner, and to this point in his career has come up significantly short in that comparison because DeForest Buckner was a stud, and Javon has battled through injuries so far in his career. I have to say that as far as pressure, it feels like Javon is under the greater amount of pressure here, because with Mike McGlinchey, could you say that he hasn't lived up to his draft stock? Sure, you could. Even when he was peak Mike McGlinchey, good run blocker, struggled in pass protection. And then when he took a step forward in one, he took a step backward in the other. And now the catastrophic injury, but at least there weren't as many people on the sort of let's criticize Mike McGlinchey train. Yeah, people thought he was overpaid. Yeah, they thought he was overdrafted, but there was recognition of his contribution along the line. Javon Kinlaw has faced quite a bit of vitriol and had this, off-season stuff that came up. So now greater eyes are upon him this season. Feels like a lot of pressure.
Before I respond to that, I just want to say hi to David McNew. He's a supporter of the channel, of many channels on 49er YouTube. So what is up, David McNew? Thanks for popping in here. Yeah, I agree with you. It's got to be Javon Kinlaw. To me, with this whole situation with Grant in the offseason, really has put the target on his back. He already had a big target on his back because he hasn't been healthy. You can't blame him for where he was drafted. That wasn't his choice.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is he was a top 15 pick, and top 15 picks are expected to perform and perform well. They're expected to be starters, high level starters, at least to me. McGlinchey is what he is. Like you said, he's this exceptional run blocker. He's a average to below average pass blocker. That's just what McGlinchey is. I don't know if the Niners are going to, go farther with him other than this year. That we've drafted some guys who could replace him.
Yeah.
But he's shown you what he is. He's been an asset in some ways to this team. What has Javon Kinlaw showed other than a propensity to be hurt and be not playing a lot and talking a lot? One thing I don't appreciate, and I'm old school, and I know a lot of my old school fans that are in here who are older guys like me and Rob. The one thing I cannot stand is people who talk a lot but don't perform. My dad always said, do it, then brag about it. That was my dad's famous line.
Yeah.
Don't talk trash, talk how great you are, perform, do it, and then you can talk about how awesome you are. To me, Kinlaw is I just don't like players that talk a bunch of trash and don't, like, you're on the sideline all the time in street clothes. How can you have any say in anything that's going on with these guys that bust their tail every week, the guys that are in the tub, getting shot up, taking whatever they're taking to get on that field to perform, and your big mouth's talking and you're not playing? To me, don't talk, just play well this year. And if you do, everything will take care of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I am old school, but I guess I disagree on that one a little bit. I would agree in a sense of players that talk brashly and then don't back it up on the field. I feel differently about Kinlaw because it is literally he's on the sideline, like he is injured. And so I have a hard time criticizing someone for being injured, for being on the sideline. I do wish that in some of these instances, he had chosen his words significantly more carefully. I'm, not a fan of the actions that he took, and I criticized that when it did happen, when he chose to come at a member of the media. That's totally unacceptable, and it does cast a little bit of a shadow on Javon Kinlaw. I would like him to reconsider that type of vitriol in the future. In particular, what he said on the live stream just came across, casting, not making him look great. And I think it gave ammunition for those that then want to pile on. And so I hope that he learns from that circumstance. But until he's back out on the field, I'll hesitate from fully judging what type of a player he is, because I want to see the fully healthy version of Javon Kinlaw. I've got this feeling that he'll be able to show us what the 49ers saw in him when they drafted him. I've got some faith that he's gonna do some things this year.
I really hope he shuts me up, because we need him.
Yeah,
we really do. This pass rush.
The interesting question, though, is like we both agree on who's got more pressure on him, but like which one would the Niners be harder pressed if they were lost for the entire season? I'd have to reverse my stance and say McGlinchey, because we do have a lot of offensive line depth, but I'm just not sure about those guys as starters as a right tackle. Whereas the Hassan Ridgeway signing and the amount of bodies we have in the defensive line room, I'd feel a little bit better about missing Kinlaw if that happened. Hopefully neither player will be lost, but if one of them was lost, I would feel a little more scared about the Mike McGlinchey loss.
Jason, I like his comment. He says, I'm rooting for Kinlaw. I am too. Just want to say, yeah. I'm not a big fan of guys that talk a lot. That's
right.
If they haven't had a chance to back it up, that's what I'm saying.
Sure.
But he says, I'm rooting for Kinlaw. I saw flashes, but trading Buckner was dumb no matter what. I agree. I think that was one. So I might have been Chasen or Robert Davis before. He said that was a full on Parag blunder. I would have to agree on that one. I DeForest Buckner not being a 49er right now and them choosing, and I've grown on Eric Armstead. I wasn't the biggest fan of him years ago. I thought he was lazy. I didn't think he played to the whistle all the time. I thought he was, he would take plays off or whatever, but he's completely changed my mind. He's completely changed his body. He's a leader in the community. So my comments have, my feelings have totally changed. But yeah, I mean, Buckner is a defensive tackle who can get 10 sacks. I mean, that's just crazy. So it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it now. I don't know. Maybe he can finish his career and come back to the 49ers in another 5, 6, 8 years or something.
That would be wonderful.
And it'd be a great
full circle moment.
Yeah, but I mean, it is what it is. I think Kinlaw is as important. You are right. But McGlinchey, if we lost McGlinchey again with a rookie, I almost said rookie quarterback, with a really young quarterback, we need as much cohesion on that offensive line as possible. Having McGlinchey and Trent locking down those tackle positions, I mean, that's about as close as cohesion as we're going to get, because the other three positions are in as much flux as possible right now. So yeah, I think McGlinchey would totally be the guy that would be missed more than anybody. But we'll get our answers soon enough, Rob. We got a couple more weeks.
Yes.
Real quick, there was some roster and power rankings that came out. I'm going to see if I could put these pictures up on the screen here. The Niners got completely slighted in both of these. It really pissed me off. Again, I'm one of those people that gets himself upset because he looks at stupid things when he should just ignore it. But let's see. Here's the first one. I don't know who this guy is, so bear with me.
Jarrett Bailey.
Eric, is it? Oh, Jarrett Bailey. So the power rankings here, we got the 49ers at 19. Behind teams like the Cowboys, the Washington Commanders, the Cardinals, the Colts, the Ravens. I think we're better in the second row here, 9 through 16. I think we're better than every single team in that row. If any place we belong, it would probably be at about 7 or 8. I don't see us falling back farther than that one. What is your take on this particular list?
I tend to agree with your statement there, that when I look at those teams in the second column, I don't see really, I mean, you could make an argument for some of them being above the 49ers. And honestly, as Jason was getting into his, logic behind it, he went the win-loss route. So he saw the 49ers as a 10-win team last year, which they were, and acknowledged that, they had lost a couple of pieces, and he figured that this was a really tough schedule. In particular, he points to the second half of the schedule being very brutal in the opponents that the 49ers come up against. I did think that, and I mentioned this on my show with Jack, that Jesse Naylor of Last Second Sports, who was challenging Jarrett on Twitter about these predictions, did accurately state that, is there a challenging second half to the schedule? Yes, absolutely. And you also have to acknowledge the lack of travel that occurs there. The 49ers playing at home for the vast majority of those games, or neutral sites like the game in Mexico City, or one of their road games is Seattle, right? So Seattle doesn't look like a hell of an opponent next year. And so it looks like a daunting schedule, in particular the second half. But when you start to get into it, doesn't seem quite as challenging. Now, Jarrett did come back and point out that, hey, they're at home. You don't have a home field advantage. Here's the 49ers record at Levi's Stadium. It's unfortunately skewed in the wrong direction with wins and losses. So kudos to Jarrett for doing his homework on our lack of home field advantage at Levi's. But I do think he's failing to take into account that this roster is improved. This is one of the better rosters in the NFL. I would put it up as, like, no question in my mind, it's a top 5 roster in the NFL. And I get you wanting to do the win-loss record, but I see 11 wins as a pretty low floor for this San Francisco 49ers team. I don't think they're on the edge of getting bumped out of the playoff mix. I think that they will be in this. And I think that they'll be competing for one of the top spots in the NFC. So, I've got to say that I think he's a little bit off on this one.
Ryan for No Border Sports says, what's up? And he says, we play better on the road anyways. Yeah, I could totally agree with that one. We are a really good road. We're road warriors for sure.
We are.
The other list we have here is this one here. This is another one that I completely disagree with, and I know you will too. So the 49ers, every roster ranked, the Niners are 18th in roster rankings behind teams. I got the comment in the way here. Let's see if I can move that. So we got the Bills. I think we're better than the Dolphins. I think we have a better roster than the Browns. I think we have a better roster than the Colts. I think we have a better roster than the Raiders, Broncos. The Niners should be at least a top 10 in this list as well. I think maybe it's a national opinion because I know the local opinion. The Niners are probably a top 5 to top 8 roster rank in the NFL. I mean, they're that damn good, and they're going to have a lot of depth, hopefully, if everybody stays healthy. What is your take on this list?
I'm with you on that 100%. Like, at least in the other one, you had Jarrett with his logic of like, well, I think the 49ers end up on the outside of the playoffs, an 8 or a 9 win team. And like, as someone who predicted the 49ers being an 11 win team, a couple of things go wrong for the 49ers. Sure. Could they end up an 8, 9 win team? They could. So that one feels like there's at least some sliver of it. Now we're talking literally about rosters. That's the title of the frickin' thing. You can't say that this isn't one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. I suppose if you believe the national narrative about the skepticism on Trey Lance with the importance of the quarterback position, like that must be what's feeding into a placement of 18th out of 32 teams as far as roster construction, actual strength of this roster. That's the only logic that makes sense to me is you're doubtful about Trey Lance, and therefore you're bringing the 49ers down because the quarterback position is so important in this league. But honestly, to me, this is a top 5 roster, and it's a lock.
Brian Culp says, I like when they rank the Niners wrong. I like it when they prove people wrong. Me too. I'm definitely. And Robert Davis, you are right. These lists are created to create controversy. Or maybe they're not, and just 49er fans are just freaking... We are fired up, man. We know we have a good team this year, and we're going to freaking lash out against these stupid lists. Because, again, I think a lot of these people are not. They're more national-based, wherever they're from. I don't think they're Bay Area. I don't think they have the inside knowledge that even us YouTuber, I'm a fan YouTuber, and I have a pretty good knowledge, at least on my team. I might not be a draft guru or a film watcher, but I know that the Niners got a really good roster. I mean, I think Jesse Naylor said it best. They either have 5 or 6 players within the top 5 in their position on their team. How is that not a great roster? I mean, linebacker, tight end, wide receiver, left tackle. I'm probably missing somebody else, but to me, it's more of a less, the knowledge isn't as great because of maybe being a national guy as opposed to being a local guy like I said, like a Barrows or a Mayoka. But yeah, they might not be created to cause controversy, but they definitely do, especially with guys like me who just get ridiculously pissed off when I see lists like that. They get me so pissed off I can't speak right. So, oh, you're muted, Rob. You're muted.
To your point, if you have 5 or 6 players that are top 5 at their position, you're talking about, of your 22 starters, you're talking about greater than 25% of your team being top 5 in the league. So even if you're filling in the rest with scrubs, which the 49ers are not, right, then you're talking about a team that deserves to be in the conversation for, top 10 in rosters. And again, the Niners are not filling in the rest of the roster with scrubs. They have a lot of quality depth on this team. It has to be either doubt in Trey Lance or the national skew for media. One of those is factoring into this.
It's all wait and see right now, Rob. But we got the only thing we could do is just, season gets here and the Niners, the only, like a lot of people are saying, the only way to do it is to just shut up people by playing well. So the Niners have a chance to just prove everybody wrong by playing well.
Yes, they do.
Just like they did in 2019. A lot of people weren't buying them until they started beating on good teams, and a lot of that narrative changed. 2 last real quick topics. I don't know if you picked up on Jerry Rice. He's been interviewed a couple times.
I did.
I love Jerry Rice, but he does not need to be in front of a microphone. He was asked about Trey Lance, and neither time he really said anything factual or anything with any real merit behind it. In one interview, he says that the Niners will go with the best player available at quarterback, which kind of gives Jimmy Garoppolo some sort of respect that he deserves. But I mean, at this point, it's kind of a dead issue. He's not going to be the quarterback of this team. And in another one, he says that, you know, Trey Lance is the guy and he's got the experience, which I found kind of weird because he doesn't really have experience. So I don't know what Jerry's talking about. I don't know if he's an old man, he's just losing it or something. But what's your take on Jerry Rice and his opinions on the 49ers, especially Trey Lance?
I thought it was interesting because I think if it came out, if I read them in the correct order, it was the first one was him basically getting behind Trey Lance. And the second one was him hedging his bet, which feels like opposite order of what you would expect there. Like you come out and you're like, well, let the both of them come into camp, compete. That's what Bill Walsh would have done. And then if you were to come back and clarify and be like, well, but I really think that this is Trey Lance's team, that would feel logical. This other way in which it seemed to have played out, where he was behind Trey Lance and then he took a step back and was like, well, Jimmy's still on the roster. Let's let him compete here. I did find it to be humorous. This is a scenario of Jerry Rice just being asked, a microphone shoved in front of his face. And I'm guessing that these weren't wildly well thought out, cogent arguments that he was making. It was just what he was feeling at the time. And the second one, certainly where he's talking about the iron sharpening iron and how Bill Walsh would have had them competing. He's at a golf tournament, right? So how focused was he on the question at hand? Did he just sort of wing the answer? I'm tempted not to take this with more than a grain of salt because from what I've heard from Jerry, he is behind the young gentleman. He does support Trey Lance. I mean, he's got Trey as a representative of Goat Fuel, as I have been educated on. So there's a little bit of partnership there. I'm siding with the Jerry that took Trey Lance's side in the initial one.
A lot of people in the comments are saying that Jerry said he would have played with Trey Lance and that he would come out of retirement to play with him.
That would be fun to watch.
Oh man, we're old now, Rob. We're old. Jerry Rice is pushing 60 and he's talking about coming out of retirement.
It's crazy.
The glory years. My last one is a little bit of sad news. I remember his name as a player. I don't really remember much about him. Jimmy Williams, former 49er defensive back, passed away today. He's my age, 42 years old, born the same year. I don't know what's going on. All these young players dying recently. Or ex-players or just young athletes in general, guys in their 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on Jimmy Williams? I don't know if you remember much of him playing. I think he was in like the early 2000s.
He was. I read some of the things that came out from Matt Barrows, Matt Mayoko, who covered the 49ers at that time, and both had positive things to say about him. I will admit that what was going on in my own personal life in those years, I was less tuned in with the 49ers during that period.
Yep.
And do remember the name, but can't speak to the individual. I will say that it's a tragedy anytime someone is lost that early in life. And I've not heard any details about what the cause of death or anything like that was, nor do I need to just acknowledge that it's sad when you lose someone far before their time. In that moment, I like to, recognize the positive contributions that they made in life. And it was either Mayoko or Barrows who called out the idea that Jimmy did contribute within the community. And those are the types of things that I feel like people should be remembered for in their passing, that it's a time for reverence and a time for respect and a time for sending out those positive thoughts and vibes and well wishes to the family who's left behind. Because honestly, in tragic deaths like this, it's one thing for the individual who was lost, but much more so for those that are left here in life to deal with the mourning, to deal with the pain of losing someone unexpectedly, if that was the case here. And so, I just view it as a solemn thing. It's sad to lose anyone in this life, and certainly someone where you feel like you have a tie to them, like someone who played for the 49ers.
Real quick, I just want to say hi to Luke Luna, who's joined the chat as we close this thing out. With me, it's just I'm a 42-year-old man. I joke around and say I'm old and this, that, and the other. But the fact of the matter is, in a modern world, if I took care of myself, I could live till I was 90. So I'm really only lived half my life. And to see somebody die so early, with so much life left in front of them that might have grandkids or, older children. Like, I'm 42, so maybe I have a 20-year-old son or 19, 18, or however old.
Right.
They're losing a father really early in their life. So that sucks. And it sucks that a lot of these young athletes, like I said, in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are just, a lot of them have been dropping dead lately. And it's what exactly is the cause? Is it mental health issues? What, COVID? It's just been a really crazy last couple of months. I forget the player from the Ravens who passed away. He was really young.
Right.
I know the Niners lost the linebacker, I forget his name, Derek Smith, I think it was, who passed away a couple months ago. He wasn't that old either. And it just makes you realize, and I'm not trying to be preachy here or say anything that's going to cause people to run, but life is so not promised. And like at any moment, some of us can go. So I guess what I'll just say is try to be positive with your interactions with people, try to be loving with the people that you care about, and say what you really feel every time you see them, because you never know. It could be the last time you talk to somebody. And, I lost my dad, 8 or 9 years ago. And it gets better with time, but it still sucks. So just think of the people in that family who are dealing with the loss of whether it's a father, a brother, whatever. So it sucks. I don't remember him per se. I remember his name. I think I kind of remember him playing, but like you, I was going through some stuff in the early 2000s and I wasn't as focused on football either. I mean, I was following football, but I had a lot of like emotional kind of weird obstacles early in my 20s that I could really care less about pro football at that point. So kind of the same place, but thank you everybody for coming on. Thank you for joining me and Rob. It's been a long time since me and Rob stream, at least a month or so. I appreciate all the people in the chat who were here, who donated. Thanks for supporting me. Thank you for supporting Rob. He appreciates it. All of his links to his Instagram, his Twitter, and his YouTube channel are all in my bio. So go check out Rob's channel. Rob is a strong 49er YouTuber. One of the few, I got a couple. He's one of the many guys in this 49er community I consider a friend inside and outside of YouTube. So
that's a fact.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for everybody who's coming in right now, like Camper Report. I've had him on before. Did he have me on, or I went on this channel? I forget. But we got to do that again too, me and him. So for anybody, Paris Harrelson also passed away too. That is correct. Man, like I said, too many young guys. It's unfortunate. But thank you again for everyone. Thank you for coming in here. Thank you, Roberto Davis, for calling us the new dynamic duo of 49er podcast. I appreciate that. Till next time, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Take care.